Welcome. This is the Programming with Codea podcast. Learn to code on the iPad for the iPad. My name is Patrick Oxel, and today we will continue our journey with Codea and talk about global variables and get an image to show up on the screen and hopefully get it to move around. Last time when I left you, we finished with lesson 2 and reminded you that instead of writing everything from scratch, you can just copy your code and paste it in as a new project so that you're not wasting time. Make sure once you start, you actually change the name so that you got the correct name there. And make sure that you change your comments to reflect what we're going to be doing. So this program displays an image and moves it around the screen. We're going to leave our setup function alone. So that's a nice good standard setup function. It changes our orientation to landscape, gets us in full screen mode, and makes sure that there's no fill, smoothing is off, and no stroke, and pushes that onto the stack so that we're starting fresh from the beginning. In our draw function, we're obviously not going to need these local variables, so we're going to get rid of those. And we're actually not going to need all of this stuff here. So we're going to leave the background part, but everything else we're going to get rid of. And oddly enough, our background, we're just going to set that to completely black. So 0, 0, 0. So to make an image show up, first of all, we're going to start with creating a background image so that our program starts nice and fresh, and then we can put our images on top. So we're going to create a background image, and to do that, there's a command called sprite, and it takes several parameters and some optional ones that we have as well. So the first thing is the name of the image. So you'll notice that once you type the sprite command and you put round brackets around, you get a little choice where you can select that and a little flyout screen will happen. So if you actually just touch in between the two round brackets, a little flyout screen will occur. And Codea comes with a whole bunch of artwork built right in that you can use. We're going to scroll down to the Space Cute artwork. And if you just touch it, it'll open up and you can see all the artwork inside. So there's all different artwork in here. We're going to use just the first two. So to begin with, we're going to select the background one. So if you just double tap, you'll notice that it actually types the name in called background into our where the parameter was, and then you can just press the back arrow and then the empty spot on the screen, and you will get the name of the background typed in for you. So we're just going to move our cursor back one. The next thing that we have to do is actually give a position for this image. And Codea has the coordinate system centered, so the center of our image is in the middle. So for us, since we're dealing with an iPad, the middle would be 512, because twice that would be 1024. So that would be our X position. And our Y position is going to be 384. So those are the first two parameters that you need to enter. The next thing that you can actually enter is the width and the height. So this image is actually smaller than the full dimensions of the iPad, so we can actually just stretch it out a little. It's not perfect for our work, but it's okay for this demonstration. And we just need to put in the dimensions of an iPad, which is 1024 by 768. So once you have that, if you run the program, you'll notice that we now have a nice image in our background. So that's how you get just a plain image showing up. Codea, like most gaming programming languages, works on a layer system, and it goes in order. So as you type code, it draws things in the order that you say that it should show up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our next image. We're going to take it and put it on top of it. So we're going to add the little beetle car, or beetle ship. And just like we did last time, we're going to place it in the middle. And we're not actually going to stretch it out, we're just going to leave it at the size that it is. So you'll notice that the parameters for stretching it out are actually optional. Oh, I forgot a set of commas, or a single comma right there. That's why there was the error. So if we run it, there's our little ship, and it shows up in the middle of the screen. So that's really good. The next problem is we actually want the little ship to move across our screen once we start it. So to do that, we actually have to create something called a global variable. So we've had local variables before, local to a function. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to create a global variable that is global to this entire program. So global variables actually should be declared up at the top of your program, just so that they show up at the very beginning and everybody sees them. When we've been declaring local variables, we've been using the keyword local. Oddly enough, to declare a global variable, you actually don't put global, you actually just leave it blank at the very beginning. So all you do is you put the name of the variable. So I'm going to call my variable man position for the little beetle ship. And the position is actually should hold two values. It should hold an x and a y. So we're going to introduce a new type today called a vector2. So a vector2 is very similar to what you're used to in math class when we were talking about the Cartesian plane or the x and y coordinates. So vector2 is holding two values, an x and a y. And that's going to represent the position of our actual man. So it's now a global variable and will exist the entire time the program runs. To get values in there at the very beginning, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to setup, and we're going to take that variable and we're going to assign it certain values. So it's a vector2 once again. So the first value is the x value. Now remember, from down here we actually placed 512 and 384. So the beetle ship position, the x and the y was 512 and 384. So we could hard code there, but there's actually a nicer way of doing it. And Codea has a built-in function called width. So if we just say the width divided by 2, then we don't actually have to remember the dimensions of the iPad. It will just figure it out for us. And just like we type in width divided by 2, we can type in height divided by 2. So now this man position is holding two values, an x and a y value, that should be the same values that we used below. So instead of actually having the 512 and the 384, I'm just going to replace those with man position dot x and man position dot y. So technically we haven't changed anything. Our program will hopefully run exactly like it did last time, but we've generalized it now. Instead of hard coding values in, we have variables that we can now manipulate. So we now have man position, which is holding two values, and we can move those around anytime we want. So if you remember, the draw function happens 30 times a second. So if we want the man ship to move, or the beetle ship to move across our screen, all we need to do is take that x value, and we need to increase it slightly each time. So to do that, there's a strange way of doing it, and you actually say, take what we currently have add 1 to it and stick it back. Just forgot to put the x value there. So take man position, his x value, add 1 to it, and then shove it right back into, because remember the equal sign, we don't actually call it equal, we say is assigned. So shove it right back into itself. So 60 times a second, that man position x value will increase by 1, and hopefully it will look like it's moving across our screen. So there's the little ship, and it's moving across the screen. So that's how you make the man move across the screen. The other thing that you could do is, remember we're actually working with an iPad here, and it has an accelerometer. So if you actually picked the iPad up and moved it left and right and tilted it, normally people would assume that that should do something in a game. So we can replace this 1 with a function that actually grabs that value from the accelerometer. And Codea has a function to do that for us. There's a keyword called gravity, and since we're dealing in the x position here, we're going to take the x position in gravity. Now, it returns a really small value between 0 and 1, depending on how much you're turning it. So it looks better if you actually multiply it by some factor. And we're just going to take ours and multiply it by a factor of 10 so that it increases more. So now what we've done is we've obtained information from the accelerometer, and we're going to use that to move the man around. So if we run our program again, my iPad is just lying right on the ground, or on the table. Obviously the table is not perfectly straight because he's sliding slightly, but as I move my iPad back and forth, the little man in his ship will move back and forth. Now that's not going to change the Y position, but you could probably figure out that you could grab the Y position as well and change it. So that's how you make a man move around using the accelerometer. So today we've covered how to declare a global variable. You just remove the keyword local, and it's now declared as a global variable. We have a special type of variable that we can now create. It doesn't hold just a single thing, but it can hold two things at once. It holds in an x and a y value for us. So that's called a vector2. We learned that you can use the keyword width and height to get the width and the height of your iPad, and then you don't have to worry about hard coding things. And we learned how to move our man around using the assignment statement. So manPosition.x is assigned manPosition.x plus. First we put in 1, or you can use gravity, which is a built-in function, to grab information from the accelerometer. And finally we learned how to put sprites onto the screen. And that's all we're going to do today.